This will be the short version because I have to catch a train to go to the hunger strike. But I promised you Abortion Ethics 101 and we have to keep our promises. So here goes. Class is in session. Welcome everyone to lesson 1, in which we will look at the status of embryos and fetuses. If you haven't yet watched the introductory video to this series, go back and remind yourself that this is just one of the chapters in the Abortion Ethics 101 syllabus. So if you're raring to go and saying, oh, but what about this other thing? We will get there. And if your other thing is not on the syllabus, tell us in the comments. And as I said, we can add stuff to the syllabus. But the status of embryos and fetuses is the topic in abortion ethics that takes most of the attention in the room, so we can't not talk about it. It is, to say the least, a controversial issue. Just about everywhere in the world, you will find people divided on this issue. Countries don't have the same legislations, cultures don't have the same views, but no one is unanimous on the topic of how to regard the state that we are in when we are becoming human life. The first thing to understand here is that we must get the question right. You will hear lots of iteration of what the question of the status of embryos and fetuses actually is. You will hear people say the question is, from when is an embryo alive? And that is not the question that really interests us here, because sure, embryos are alive. They're not independently alive. They have to be in a womb in order to develop, but still they are alive. Just as many other entities are alive. Carrots are alive. Daisies are alive. Many, many things are alive. And we usually consider being alive as not being sufficient to have moral status, or at least not the kind of moral status that we are curious about when we are asking ourselves the question of the status of embryos and fetuses. We usually eat live things for breakfast on a routine basis. So it's not being alive that is the defining characteristic that we need to be looking at when we want to know what the status of embryos and fetuses is. Other people will say the question is, from when is it human? This is better. Nevertheless, if human means having a human genome, all of our cells have a human genome, and we don't ask ourselves the same questions about the cells in the root of our hair, for example, as we do about embryos and fetuses. So that can't be the right question either. A better question is, from when does an embryo or a fetus carry moral rights? From when does it have a status such that it should have moral status? Now we're getting somewhere. Sometimes this question is phrased as, from when should it have personhood? But I like the moral status question better because we can have moral status even if we're not a person. So when we become a person, of course, then we will have moral status, but we could also have moral status earlier, and that formulation of the question leaves that option open. Now, how do we reply to the question? There are many candidates for a reply to the question. This is where most of the disagreement actually happens. And here we're going to end this video and we'll address the candidate answers to the question in the next video to give you time to discuss candidate answers that you know about in the comments of this video. In your discussions, do not necessarily assume that people who are wording a candidate answer believe that answer, right? The question I asked you is not what do you think, but what candidate answers do you know about? So you may or may not stand behind the candidate answers that you are giving us in the comments. Be wary about that because these discussions can get heated. Please be civil to one another. It would be very surprising in a class of this size if you all agreed with each other. Expect to disagree. Please disagree politely. We have finished our first class. See you soon. Yeah.